from the left, some of the reporters and others are attacking the Biden administration for effectively recreating Trump's policy.
Yeah.
And the Biden press secretary just completely crumbled when faced with that. Let's take a listen.
Just following up on the border, I spent a long time covering immigration stuff during the Trump years. I never saw more damning quotes from immigration advocacy groups and human rights groups during the Trump years as I saw yesterday towards this administration. Just reading one to you, Eleanor Acer, who's one of the leading advocacy people and heads up a refugee group, called what the president did yesterday a humanitarian disgrace. And that was echoed across the board in literally scores of emails I got from every humanitarian group. What does the administration say to the overwhelming consensus from people who advocate on behalf of asylum seekers and refugees and migrants that what the president did yesterday was a humanitarian disgrace?
Well, obviously, we take a different view. What we would say is that this is a president who understands that safe and legal immigration into this country is a key cornerstone of our own security and prosperity.
Clearly, you can see that they just can't handle any questioning on this whatsoever. And it highlights what you were discussing, which is, look, the border's been a problem for them since day one. They basically have had no idea what to do. They kind of fought Title 42 in court, then they couldn't. And now they're effectively, they're recreating the Remain in Mexico policy for 3 more of the countries.
They're not recreating it, they're expanding it.
So they're expanding Remain in Mexico. And by the way, I support Remain in Mexico. I think it's probably the best solution outside of the judges. I don't think, we should just allow people to come here willy-nilly. But the point of all of this, I want to say, is that whether you're left or whether you're right, this is full-blown, pure hypocrisy. And frankly, I don't think it's actually going to help him in any way. I think it's clear what's happening here. He's going to run for president again. He knows the border is a huge problem. He's trying to recreate Trump policy, but kind of appease like liberals who effectively want like open borders. And he's like, well, what do I do here? I'm going to try and, create some sort of third way. But here's the thing. No Republican is going to trust Biden on the border after 2 years of what we've been happening down there. And I also don't think he's going to get any particular credit with the left or even with Democrats for attacking it this way. And it was also a very cowardly visit, I think, in my opinion, going to just El Paso ahead of his trip to Mexico. We're about to talk about what's happening in Mexico right now ahead of its visit. But look, I mean, even Trump did more, actually, even Obama did more of an effort in actual visits down there. I mean, to the Biden administration, who have they sent? Kamala Harris down to the Northern Triangle? I mean, it's just not been a seriously treated issue.
But part of what happened is that Obama thought if he was super hardline on immigration and, deporter-in-chief, which he was, that would give him the political credibility to strike a deal with Republicans on immigration reform. And Republicans don't want to strike a deal on immigration reform. They like the issue. They like being able to send cameras down to the border and show thousands of people sleeping under a bridge or whatever. They like going down to some country and finding a caravan and like freaking people out before midterm elections. They like having this issue remain unsolved. And so I have all kinds of issues with Biden and this policy. I think, again, Title 42 is absurd at this point. The idea that this is like justified by the pandemic is stupid. People have a right to claim asylum. The countries that we're talking about, let me give you the 4 countries that we're talking about here where the bulk of the migrants are coming from. It is Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Venezuela. Okay, 3 of those 4 countries, we right now have massive sanctions on, which are part of why people are so desperate. It's not the whole story, but it's a big part of why people are so desperate and wanting to come here in the first place. And then Haiti, our hands are dirty. I mean, the dude we're propping up in Haiti may have had something to do with the last prime minister's death.
Here's the thing. Does that mean every person that the U.S. has ever interfered with has a right to come here? Like, by that standard, anyone from Iraq should be allowed to come to the United States.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people from Iraq who should be allowed to come to the United States.
But they don't share a land border.
Look, there's two things here. Number one, I'm pointing out, we are to blame for a lot of the misery in these countries that is causing people to want to flee in the first place. So if you wanted to deal with the root of the problem, you don't think that a lot of the misery in Cuba is because of us or Venezuela?
I think some of it is their problem too. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, if you have people who have legitimate reasons to come here and are fleeing violence and chaos that, by the way, the war on drugs also helps to create, there are a lot of things we could do by changing our policy to make it so fewer people wanted to come here in the first place, because this is not like a fun journey that people want to undertake just for shits and giggles. That's number one. Number two, people have a right, if they have a legitimate asylum claim under our law and under international law, to file for that claim. The idea that the pandemic still now should change that is absurd at this point. But because you have Republicans who do not want to solve this issue, who like the fact that they can send cameras down there and create political upset about it at election time, you have an insane process, and then you end up for the Biden administration to signal to, the right and that they're, serious and whatever, not only recreating the Trump administration policy, but actually expanding the Trump administration
Yeah, but I don't
policy.
think Republicans are the only people who love this issue. I think a lot of Democrats are very comfortable with the fact that millions of people can just come here illegally and stay, which I think is crazy and completely insane. And look, the idea that every crappy country on earth...
Because what I see is...
Well, then why don't they're also not... They're the ones who have effectively allowed catch and release and gone to bat for that program over the last 20 years.
Because that's what...
No, that's not catch. That's catch and release.
That's what national law determines. And the reason why you have people who stay here so long is because of this backlogged immigration system. And by the way, the overwhelming majority of people who claim asylum do show up then for their court-ordered hearings.
That's the first court hearing.
But it's
not
insane.
The actual last one.
It's insane that you have years go by that people are here, and that's true.
Sure.
And by the time that you have people who've been here for years, then to say, okay, well, your claim is not proper and you have to be removed. Yeah, that becomes a lot more difficult of a process. So listen, I just think it's an issue where there is a lot of dishonesty, where Republicans like the problem and don't actually want to solve it, and where a lot of our policy here in terms of sanctioning these countries exacerbates the issue so that we have more flows of migrants than we would otherwise. I'm not saying it's 100%. I'm not saying we're the only problem in these countries. But are we contributing to the problem in each one of these nations where the bulk of the migrants are coming from? 100%.
Yes, I just think that a lot of these countries have agency. Nicaraguans, Daniel Ortega, we didn't create Daniel Ortega. He created Daniel Ortega. There are many countries in Central America which are doing fine. Costa Rica and many others. It's not like a complete cause on behalf of the U.S. They happen to be benefited by the fact that they can march here from across Mexico, which I don't think is fair, actually, if you think about the rest of the country. Look, this is a difference of opinion. I don't think you have a right to come here. And under some of these asylum standards, they're absurd. Like if somebody says they're fleeing domestic violence. Look, I have a deep sympathy with anybody fleeing domestic violence. That doesn't mean you get to come to the United States. There's 1 billion people on Earth who are suffering domestic violence by one standard from the Human Rights Campaign. You're gonna allow 1 billion people
But do you agree that there are certain asylum claims that are justified? For example, you brought up Daniel Ortega, who is known to persecute his political enemies.
Okay, his political enemies, sure, but if you're an average economic migrant, maybe. And then, look, even the Biden standard.
I don't deny that there are a lot of people and human traffickers who exploit the fact that we have these massive backlogs in the system and bring people here basically on the promise that you're basically going to get to stay. You just have to say the magic words and you'll get to stay. There are 2 ways you solve that, because people do have a right when they have legitimate asylum claims based on our law and international law. They have a right to make those claims and have them adjudicated. There are 2 core issues here. Number one, the way that we are screwing over these countries ourselves and making it more likely that you have more migrant flows. And again, you can look at the 4 countries where most migrants are coming from and see how much of a direct impact we ultimately have. And 2, if you end this backlog, which I know you also support, then you get rid of this effective loophole that enables people who don't have justifiable asylum claims to come here and feel like they're going to be able to stay indefinitely. To me, that seems like the 2 core issues. And, I'm sure there are plenty of Democrats who are bad faith on this. The Republicans certainly aren't interested in solving the problem. And so you end up with a disgusting humanitarian disaster like what the Biden administration is ultimately
I can agree that it's not fair to anybody. I have sympathy for poor people in another country who say, hey, if you pay $50,000, it can get you to America? Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy. My parents came here to this country for very similar reasons, for economic opportunity. I get it. What I'm saying is the system has to be the system has to have some merit, and actually what you're seeing is that you have a deep suspicion of many people, including myself, of the entire immigration system, because I think it's been made a mockery of over the last 20 years, specifically with some of these policies. And I do want to say, Krystal, I hate to say it, but I do think a lot of people like the fact that millions of people are coming here illegally, because once you're here, we all know how difficult it is to get them out, and they want to legalize them, and I think they want to get them to vote. And I'm not saying this in a conspiratorial, like, racial way. I'm saying I think that they like the fact that people are coming here. They have the entire, you know, like, oh, immigrants are the people who have more children, so actually this is the way that we have to solve our demographic crisis. I think there's some truth to that, but look, I mean, the truth is, I think they like that they're coming here.
I do think that is conspiratorial.
Then why continue the policy?
Because you ultimately, I mean, the people who have really actually tried to come to some sort of immigration deal, which always includes more border enforcement and more border patrol, have been Democrats. I mean, they have been the ones who have actually offered some, even Joe Biden offered some sort of package of here's how we're going to deal with this issue ultimately. And, you know, there is no interest from Republicans in ultimately solving this problem. So I'm not washing Democrats' hands of culpability here, but I do think it's conspiratorial, this idea that they just want to, like, ship in a bunch of illegals and make them vote for Democrats. Latinos are not even voting for Democrats, like, overwhelmingly anymore. So the, you know, racial demographic argument here doesn't even really add up anymore.
I don't even care about the racial part. What I'm really saying is that I think there's a lot of people who are very comfortable with the fact that millions of people get to come here illegally, and they are very okay with, I mean, look, non-starter for every single Democratic immigration deal is comprehensive immigration reform, which effectively means every single person who's here illegally gets to stay and becomes a citizen. I have a big problem with that.
Who voted ultimately for more judges to adjudicate these claims? I mean, this is actually something that the Biden administration was pushing. So again, the thing that leads to people staying here so long under the system is this backlog. That should be something everyone could agree on to ultimately solve it, but I see zero political interest ultimately in resolving the issue.
I do agree it will not happen.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.